There's only one time in the entire Bible that anybody sees the true form of Jesus.
And it's a rather strange story, isn't it? You only have 3 disciples who see it, go way offline to the top of a mountain to see it. Jesus' face and clothes become radiating with light. Moses and Elijah, who've been long dead, appear to him and are talking to him about his impending death. And also a cloud happens to roll in, and there's a voice speaking in the cloud.
And the voice that's in the cloud is not who you think it is. In fact, none of that stuff means what you think it means. Hey everybody, welcome to Swedenborgian Life Podcast. This is Dr. Jonathan Rose.
Hey Curtis.
And my name is Curtis Childs. Today we're talking about the transfiguration, which is like a thing that happens in the Bible.
Yes.
And it's Jesus. And so Jesus is supposed to be God and the center of reality. Like everything that we experience hinges somehow on Jesus as God. And the things he did when he was in the world were super important, not only at the time, but now they're important as well. Somehow everything in my life has been altered by his coming, or that's the theory. So what does it mean? And why is he, I think you were just making the point that he doesn't seem that magical when he comes.
It's certainly, lots of people didn't think he was anything particular to write home about. There were stories about his healing, like that was amazing. But then you see him, he just looks like an ordinary, there's no sort of glow. So many paintings have a halo, or there's a dove flying over his head or something like that. And once during his baptism, that yes, you do get the dove thing. But most of it was just ordinary guy in ordinary clothes, vaguely homeless, itinerant, not much to write home about.
Which is not what the prophecies said.
No, they say the Messiah is going to come in glory, and yeah.
But he only comes in glory one time.
Yeah.
But he's sitting there with this up his sleeve. Why doesn't he show everybody it? Why does he show these disciples this amazing, here's what I really got going on in these really controlled conditions with these strange details? How is this going to help me in my life?
Yeah. And I'm thinking of the Old Testament scripture that says, you are a God who hides yourself. And I think that is true. Like there was as much sort of cloaking as revealing, or even more, that went on when he was walking this earth.
Well, you know what that's like? Regular life, where you're trying to think about God and believe in God and find God in life. And sometimes you see little glimpses, but often it's like, where are you? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And that somehow the transfiguration happens inside of you as well. Let's read it. Will you do the honors here? We're talking about, let's read it's only a couple of verses. Matthew 17, 1-8, so we can get background for our story, and then we'll go pick it apart.
We'll just go right through. Now, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud, saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise, and do not be afraid. When they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only.
What is going on?
And that's it.
What is going on? What is this dynamic too? Just there, I'm going to do something that scares you. Don't be afraid. That is the way that it always goes. Angels show up in the Christmas story. Yikes, don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
I'm doing the thing that's going to overwhelm you, and don't be afraid.
Well, I'm also struck by the fact that, to me, if you were taken up a high mountain and then somebody's face started to radiate light and their clothes are shooting out and dead people are having conversations around you in their glory, really, it's the voice from the cloud that terrifies them? I think I would be terrified before. I mean, I would be sort of overawed before the voice in the.
Yeah.
I mean, the voice in the cloud just says, "This is my son." They'd hear him.
What's he
What
doing?
was terrifying about that particular part? That's odd.
What's the point of this whole thing? Why does God do stuff like this in general? And I think the answer would be this is a portrayal. This is
Nicely put. Yeah.
showing, this is a depiction of something. This is like a thesis or an essay. This is telling you but in the language of God.
Yes.
Which is this language of symbolic, instead of words, it's things. And he's saying, I'm going to tell you something that even the disciples don't get. But there's so much truth packed into this that you and I can read it couple thousand years later, and it's telling us something insightful and surgical about our lives.
Yeah, there's artistry in it.
So let's, using the lens that Swedenborg has, the lens of reading correspondences, let's go thing by thing and figure out what this means. It's sort of an index of everything that is important about who Jesus is and what he is. And the first thing this demonstrates is the divinity of Jesus.
Yes.
That a person is actually God at the same time as being a person, which is like, you take it for granted, but that's something.
Yes. Yeah, not like other people. And somehow this light that comes shooting out of his body also affects his clothes. So his clothing is also, which is, I could see, okay, so he has a divine nature that they haven't seen before. So now he's radiant. Why would it affect his clothing?
Even my clothes are divine. I'm like you, but I'm not like you. This is what he's showing. So this is from Swedenborg's New Jerusalem 292. People who suppose the Lord's human nature to be just like the human nature of anyone else are not taking into consideration that he was conceived by the divine, nor are they pondering the fact that the body is for everyone an image of the soul, nor are they considering that he was resurrected with his whole body, nor the way he appeared when he was transfigured, when his face shone like the sun.
That's an interesting list, isn't it? Like, yeah, if you think he's just another human being. And another one I would sort of pile onto that list, that if you read the New Testament, if you think, okay, he's a wise person, he's a teacher, the things that he says about himself are either he's insane or he's God. I don't get sort of normal human being out of saying, I am the light come into the world. You know,
I am the way, the truth, and the light.
Who says that?
Yeah.
Right.
It's important to understand that the person that there's these two parts to God. Mm-hmm. There's this human part and this divine part. They took great lengths, went to great length, took great pains to go and walk around with people. When they go up a hill, he's got to walk up the hill with them. He's born into the world just like everyone else is. He has to eat food. And then he's saying, look, at the same time, I can do this incredible stuff. I'm God. Swedenborg feels like it's important to argue with people who think Jesus is not God, but is just someone else. Like, this is an important part of what the foundation of your belief system needs to be, is that God is a person. God was this particular person. Yes.
Yeah, and I've known a number of people who see him as a wise teacher and would put him on the same dignified shelf with the Buddha and with other, like other great teachers.
It's funny because there's a truth to that, in that Swedenborg says that the traditions of the world are just fine pathways into heaven.
Yes.
All of them that
they all work.
That ask you to have some kind of belief in God and to not do things that are basically akin to the Ten Commandments. Any of those things can work. So in one way, yes, sure, the Christian tradition is another one. But Also, Jesus Christ like rules the universe, is the creator. Like those things are both happening at the same time.
Yeah, and he emphasized in that statement you just read that they had basically one divine and one human parent. So he's kind of a hybrid, right? He's got this divine heredity and this human heredity mixed in there together, so that his soul and spirit, at a deep level, he's divine, but on the outside, ordinary human being who has to go through teething and teens and all the stages.
Okay. I feel like I'm trying to get that all the way grasped, but I think we can work toward that. Like what is it? What is the essential nature of that? Why do we have to know that? He says this, Swedenborg says this extra thing about it. It is true that the Lord was born like any other human and received human frailty from his mother, but he banished this human nature so thoroughly that he was no longer Mary's son. He made the humanity in him divine, which is what is meant by saying that he was glorified. He also showed Peter, James, and John, when he was transfigured, that he was a divine human.
Aha. Right. And I know Swedenborg mentions that little detail, that although the Bible refers to Mary as his mother, he always, for some reason, calls her woman. He doesn't say mom or something.
We go through our own little version of this process, which is called rebirth, or being born again.
Yeah.
Which is there's a life that you start with, which is a self-centered, material-centered life. That's the things you understand and strive for is your own gain, reputation, honor, whatever.
Yeah.
And then material gratification. That's it. It's only throughout, or those things are the greatest things in life. That's how you start. They're
in a sense the only thing, it's an entire world. That is the world. Isn't that what we're all doing?
Yeah. But then there's this thing that happens over the course of your life when you become a new person. And the difference between the old person and the new person is that the most important thing, the thing that you care about the most, becomes goodness or love.
Yeah.
Or what is right. That's the difference. Is now what's right. I get the deepest satisfaction in life from knowing that what is right is done, that I am serving what is good and right. That takes the place of myself. Instead of the greatest thing in existence is myself, the greatest thing, at first it can kind of be the greatest thing is the people I know and love, so I'll kind of care about them. But eventually it's goodness. It's so that no matter where I am with whoever, I want what's good and right and fair and just to happen to everyone. That's the new person. And that's our mini version of what Jesus did, which was he started with the same human heredity everyone had. He turned it divine. We are slowly emptying ourselves out so that the divine in it so that we receive the divine. Okay? We're trying to do our own little teeny transfiguration.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And it's making me think, for some reason, some random reason, of that wonderful clip that came out a few years ago. Do you remember? I think it was a Wimbledon's final. It was some important tennis match. There's a whole crowd of people watching the match, and there's two guys slugging it out there. And then the one guy says something to the other guy like, "You should challenge that call," because the ump called it in, and he said, "I think that was actually your point."
Yeah.
That's
exactly
challenge
right.
the call. And the noise in the audience, what was so amazing was everybody's like, what in the history of ever, who does that? Who is in this ferocious competition with somebody else for this championship? Who says, you were right? Ask the ump. I think you'll get an advantage by doing that.
Okay.
Because it's not normal human nature.
No, this is good.
And the sound of that crowd was
you've broken off what we need to break off here, because what was he doing there? That this guy was doing it not for the sake of himself, but for the sake of tennis.
Yeah.
Because he's saying there's this thing called tennis.
Yeah.
And this is a thing that everyone in the audience is there because they love tennis. even if they love him as a player, he exists within the context of the tennis. And then tennis is a sport in which the person with the greatest skill gets rewarded for it. And he's saying, what I want is for tennis to happen rather than for me to happen.
to win.
Because it could be that you take that even farther. Like some people will cheat. They'll do steroids, or they will deflate the balls, right?
Yeah, right.
Because with this thing, it all exists to serve me. The rule, sure, the framework that got up to where I can be called world champion, that's built on tennis and all this rules and all that, whatever. How do we circumvent that so that it's me at the top? Whereas this person is saying, I want to be at the top for sure, but there's something that is greater than even that, which is tennis, which is the rules, which that's just an extension. That's like an extension of that is to say fairness.
Yeah.
You know why I'm not going to take that even when it served me? Because it's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair. That is a new thing. That's a new thing. That's the opposite of when you're sitting in the line of cars and everybody's having to wait so long because the light just lets like 3 cars through. And one person says, I'm going into the shoulder all the way up to the front, and then I'm putting my blinker on and merging in. I'm skipping all of you because I am more important than everyone else in the world. Right. That's the old person. The new person sits there and says, what's important is fairness. And if everybody did that, society would collapse.
The whole thing would collapse.
But also, unless there's some remarkable circumstance, like I need to get to the hospital, who am I to say my life and what I care about matters more than what
you don't even know what these other people in the cars, what are they going to? They all want to get something.
Now you're divine. Now that's a divine.
Yeah.
That's that. Now you're like God, because God is not in it for himself. Jesus wasn't coming here for himself.
No.
Was it a fun vacation?
Yeah, was it a little pleasure cruise? No, not exactly.
He was doing a lot of hard work.
Did it end well? In terms of a worldly life? No, didn't turn out well.
Why does he need to do any of that? Because it's for everyone else.
Yeah. Because
it's for goodness and fairness. It's because and fairness and goodness, those are all just little subsets of being magnanimous toward the whole human race.
Yeah.
Love for the entire human race. That's what is going on. That's what Jesus represents, is that he came down and became the embodiment. He embodied his love for the whole human race.
Yeah.
In the same method and way by which we do our mini version. Okay, now I get that. Let's talk about the mountain.
Okay.
Because we said, so Jesus...
all these details. Always the details.
Well, so Jesus is coming down into the world. As we said, he could have come down transfigured in the first place. Wouldn't that have been easier? If he's trying to convince people to listen to him, to follow him, trying to get them to believe that he's God, how about you just be transfigured right from the get-go?
Yeah, and it's the fulfillment of all these grand prophecies that have been going on for, I don't know, thousands of years, saying one shall come, a star so rise, and then he comes and he doesn't do that.
If you are the guy...
He doesn't seem star-like. He doesn't... I mean, I know, yes, there's all that amazing healing and preaching and so on, and yet somehow he did it in such a way that it was easily rejectable. Lots of people rejected him.
This is the God of the universe. If you own the club,
yes,
do you wait in line?
Yeah. No.
This is the God of the universe. Why does he come down and be a kind of a person that other people can say...
And wait outside the club and try to get it. Just hope you'll get it.
The people in his hometown tried to throw him off a cliff.
Yes.
Because they didn't believe him. Why would you do that? What is your mission? What exactly are you trying to accomplish? I must not understand. If you came to get everyone to acknowledge who you were and to do what you want them to do and to be seen as the God of the world, if that's what you're really after, then you wouldn't have lived the life that you did. So what are you trying to do? Everything must have a purpose to it, because he had the absolutely blank slate, could have had his life go any way he wanted.
Anyway.
Could have do anything. So even in this story, it's weird the way he approaches it.
Yes.
He takes them up on a mountain.
Only 3 of them.
Why you do that? So it's
which is quite a slog. Yeah, I mean, Yeah, you're climbing and you're going, wait, like, where are we going? What are we doing?
In verse 1, we'll just recap what you said. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. Couldn't you have just you're back in wherever you were, Galilee or something. There's a lot of people there. Transfigure yourself right there. Let all the disciples see it. Let all the people see it. That's an easier way to...
And what do you say to the other 9 disciples? Oh, we're just gonna, we'll be back later.
Yeah, you're playing favorites, and what? So that doesn't make any sense unless you understand correspondences.
Yes,
but if correspondences, a mountain is what?
Mountain is love. Mountain is love, and it's the highest kind of love. It's a heavenly love.
Swedenborg puts it this way here: since a mountain symbolized heaven and love, therefore Jehovah came down upon the top of Mount Sinai and proclaimed the law, and therefore the Lord was transfigured before Peter, James, and John on a high mountain. So another thing that doesn't make sense, if you're God, is you are going to give us a book. This is your God book that you're going to give to the human race, the Bible, if you believe Christianity.
Yeah.
Your book can just say, in the most mind-blowingly elegant, complex,
gorgeous
you
way.
Give us the chemical formula for everything. You can do anything you want. Why is your book so convoluted? Why is it this collection of stories that seem to have a very different voice from one to the other, that don't have obvious morals a lot of the time or lessons? Why is that your book?
And a lot of strange repetition too. It strikes me, like you only have a few pages and yet you have the same stories over and over again.
It's written in correspondences. It's written in this same language of symbolism, and that's when the consistency starts to shine through. So you see, mountain, Jesus took them on a mountain, because anywhere Scripture talks about a mountain, it's talking about love. So 10 Commandments, it's a mountain. Here, it's a mountain. And then in each of our lives, when do we see God for what he's actually like? When do we actually start to understand what life is about? It's only when you're up in love.
In a very elevated state, which we're not often... we spend most of our lives down here in the valley, kind of interacting with each other and having thoughts and feelings and frustrations and, disappointments. And when we're up in that state of transcendent love, like people say when the day their child was born or things like this, you're just in a different state.
Yeah.
There you see something.
So in us, there's all the 12 disciples, because this God does things fractally, and Scripture is written in such a way that it applies to all people at all times. So these 12 disciples are 12 different aspects to your humanity, to everyone's humanity.
Yeah.
The rest of the crowds in Galilee and in Bethlehem and in Jerusalem are different parts of your consciousness. Not all the parts of you can see who God is. There's a bunch, as you said, there's a bunch of this sort of like snippy, gossipy, secular parts of us that they've got their role, and and we're working on them.
Yeah.
But they can't come up and see God for who he really is. That's why he doesn't do the transfiguration back in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That those people can't handle it.
No, and I think we talked about it in another show, but even after his death and resurrection, he never appears in public. It's always behind
what's he doing?
Closed doors to this same small group that he was talking to. Well, right? There's just a few people who see it.
You can see where people might get the impression that God, or the only conclusion they can come to is, he's testing us. He's got this.
Yeah.
You only deserve me if you can follow these like teeny breadcrumbs.
Playing hard to get or something.
Or somehow that's the only explanation you can think of for this bizarre behavior is that you really got to earn it, and you've for somehow the greatest,
or a special club,
club. Right. The greatest virtue, I guess, a human being could possess under that thinking would be the ability to recognize God under these very murky conditions, or there's there's something else. And I think
Yes.
the something else is that you can't handle the truth. Most of the states in our mind are not giving up that self-centered life
Right.
and that materialistic life, do not really believe in the existence of God, do not really think, sure, belief in God is one thing, do not really think that love and altruism is more important than self-centeredness.
Not all that interested.
And
frankly,
wouldn't listen.
you know.
It goes to sleep when it would click on this podcast and the kinds of things that are being discussed. Not that we're doing the best job of it, but we're trying to talk about these things and just like snooze fest. That's not real. I don't care about that. But you get someone in the right state, same person later on.
Yes.
Might come across any podcast that's talking about this kind of stuff, and it lights up for them.
Right.
It matters. Or they hit a certain phase of life. There's only parts of you that can see this for what it really is. If you are just ready anytime, anywhere, then I would think that God would just be like right in your face all the time. If it would work, but you would shut down and you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't open it up. You wouldn't open up to it.
Yeah. And the fact that it's 3 disciples who see him, 3 means everything. So it's more inclusive than it sounds, because 3 are all these kinds of goodness and truth, which is also the meaning of the 12. They have the same basic meaning.
Yes. Well, that's another. So correspondence is 3 means all, 12 means all, but it's in different ways.
Yeah. And the 3, Peter means faith. And there's various different stories about Peter that relate to faith.
For you guys at home, what we're saying is, because it just sounds like, wow, what are they? They're just like, moo means boo. They're just, what are they talking about? What is coming out of their mouth? I'm going to rewind this. No, that is what they said. What we mean is, mountains mean love every time they're used in Scripture.
Yes.
That is why you can go back thousands of years to the books of Moses, and the 10 Commandments can only come down on Mount Sinai, because that's only in a state of love can you receive that from God.
Why didn't they get them in Egypt? Why have to go out in the middle of nowhere to the top of a mountain to get the 10 Commandments?
So it is that the mountain Jesus goes up on means the same thing, and same thing with people. So who is the one? Yeah. Peter.
So Peter means faith.
Why? So Peter means faith. Whenever it's talking about Peter, I'm like lecturing this camera. Like I'm just like, please, there's a system to it. We're trying to make sense. We don't want it to not make sense. We want to make sense.
Yes, that's
we
right.
are trying. This is as well as we can do. Every time. But this is worth pursuing, because it's the only way the Bible makes sense. Without this, the Bible does not make sense.
Right.
Why does Jesus kind of have these favorites and it's only 12 people that follow him around? Peter always means faith.
Even of those 12, like most of them, you never hear, there's not more than one story about them.
So I'm sorry to have cut you off there.
No, but it's great. It's a great riff. And
so Peter
most of them
faith.
are chopped liver, but Peter, and then you see why, and Peter means, with a lot of these symbolisms in Swedenborg, they have a good meaning and a bad meaning. So the mountain can be a good kind of love. It can be a mountain of like ego and narcissism too. And so, like the mountain that needs to be cast into the sea is a mountain of narcissism and love and self-love.
Yes.
And Peter means faith, both a good kind of faith, like believing in the Lord, but also 10 seconds later, Jesus will call him Satan, because it's a different kind of faith, or it's a faith alone. James means your goodwill, your charity, your love toward people. And that's why he's often in these stories with Peter. Sometimes they're just stories with Peter and John, and sometimes Peter, James, and John.
Okay.
But James so Peter's the faith, James is what's been called charity, or your love for people. John is the good works, the loving things you actually do. And that's why Jesus says John is his favorite, because he's just nakedly has a favorite. Just the disciple whom Jesus loved. Like, what am I? Chopped liver,
You're all the children of God. We're all the children of God, aren't we?
Yes.
And then it says that but
there was one who was
when
really
God
special.
actually comes down, there's all these people. They're all his children. You 12, you come with me. I'm hanging out with you all the time. Of the 12,
And you're the one I love.
hey, Mom and Dad, who do you love, me more or my sister more? We could never pick a favorite. If you ask God that, John. John's my favorite.
Yeah, that's why I leaned on his. Yeah, right. It's like, yeah.
However, and that seems weird and divisive, and it does not satisfying, and it just, okay, so if John is your favorite kid, and then there's all the other 12 disciples, and then everyone else, and then, am I number 945 billion? Where am I in that?
Where am I? Yes,
But
right.
if there's a correspondence, and John means your good works, is that what you said? Good works. John means your good works. That what John is in every single life everywhere. You open the door for this person because they had their hands full. That's John. You thought
that's the one Jesus loves.
You thought, hey, my wife likes coffee when she wakes up. I'm gonna go and make it for her. I never can remember that, but whenever I do, I'm like, that's so great. That's John.
Yeah.
We've
all got John. Yeah. So it's not it almost looks like, oh, this special club, and you have to be on the inside, or you have to be related to somebody, or but there's some special treatment. When you realize that's something that we all have all the time. It's something we can practice today and tomorrow. That's the part that Jesus is right there. When you're doing something loving to somebody, boom, you can feel it sometimes right there in that. Because John is the one, that's the one he loves.
How dare we think that God would think or speak differently to anyone? That God would have any difference in feeling at looking at one person versus another.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
It's a terrible thought.
Yeah.
It seems he's got these special disciples he does this special stuff with. But if you understand that for every single one of us in the history of life to eternity, there's these parts, you have parts to you. One of them is your faith, which that's the part of you that can think of things like God and start to try to love that truth and inquire into that mystery.
That's right.
There's that part of you. Then there is your love for other people. And then there's the nice things you do. There's the good things you do for people. Those are the parts in you right now that God will take into this state of love. And when you're there, show those parts of you who he really is, what life is really about. Anyone, anytime, any century, any continent, that's what's going on. I like that. That then makes me say, that could be how God is.
You break through to a very different way of holding that text, and suddenly the thing that was irritating and a little frustrating becomes gorgeous and beautiful and universally accessible.
Just irrelevant. Even at the beginning of this podcast, I was like, okay, how do I get traction here? Is it about the most important things in life, as we're talking about the divine, human, and stuff? How is it about the most important things in life? Because why am I interested in talking about God in the first place? It's not that I am particularly adept at nor interested in theological concepts. I don't have a degree in theology. Why? And even religion itself, I'm not a scholar of religious history. The reason that I love it and that I'm so stuck on the Swedenborg, and through that lens, the Bible, Jesus, is because that's talking about the most important things in life. It's talking about the solution to life.
Yes.
And until you understand, religion is supposed to be talking about the most important things in life. If you can get sidetracked and it becomes angels dancing on the head of a pin, isn't that what they say? But it's supposed to be about the way that love is.
Yes.
Then we're talking.
Effective, loving, how people treat each other, how to heal society, the whole thing.
Knowing that that's what everything in this story is about, let's talk about the shining face of God.
All right.
Why is this, in Matthew 17:2, it says, and he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun. Okay. You wouldn't have guessed that was what was going to happen. However, every spiritual experience or near-death experience anyone has, they talk about beings who radiate light.
They do. And it's not a physical thing that we experience physically. Is it? Like do people just like, oh, wow, turn your face down?
0 times.
Keeping me up at night.
0 times have I seen that, right? It's not even happening for us right now.
With digital effects and so on, it's something we see in lots of movies, but it's not something you actually see with other people in this world.
What's the technical reason why this happened, and then what's the spiritual reason?
And why like the sun? Could be the moon, or it could be
his face shone like the sun. That's right.
Or like a fire or something like that.
That's right. This is from Secrets of Heaven 7083. Heat and light in the natural world emanate from the sun in the world. Okay?
There, I will accept that.
You know what? I'm not going to even try to argue that. Whereas spiritual heat and spiritual light, or love and faith, which is what spiritual heat and spiritual light are, emanate from the sun in heaven. The Lord, which is Swedenborg's shorthand for Jesus, is the sun in heaven. And the heat which comes from him as the sun is love, while the light which comes from him as the sun is faith. The fact that the Lord is light is clear in John, when Jesus said, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And the fact that the Lord is the sun is clear in Matthew, and then it quotes what we've just said. When Jesus was transfigured, his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as the light.
Nice.
So again, a recurring correspondence that anytime Jesus, why is he talking about being a light? Is because there's two things that come from him, love and faith, which is why these two disciples were brought.
Why like the sun?
The Lord's appearance as a sun in heaven may be inferred from his transfiguration before Peter, James, and John when his face shone like the sun. This is how the Lord was seen by those disciples when they had been lifted out of their bodies and were in the light of heaven.
Oh, so Swedenborg is adding a little detail there that they weren't even in the physical, like their spirits had been lifted up into a kind of altered state of consciousness, or whatever you'd call it. But yeah, they were in a transcendent state. Because his physical face, I don't think did physically radiate physical light. People would have seen it.
It's interesting.
Nobody says that he had that characteristic.
To me, a satisfying part of the Swedenborg theory of everything is that Swedenborg believes that these miracles happened as they're described.
Right.
However, he says it's not arbitrary. It follows the same laws that everything else has followed. What's that magic system thing? That's
hard
like
magic and soft magic.
You're talking
hard magic and soft magic. So in fantasy things like the Lord of the Rings, there's soft magic, which is like the main Gandalf the wizard can do magic stuff, and you don't know, he can just sometimes do things, and you don't know what the laws are governing that. They don't explain it. But
it's never explained. Never explained what did he get better at it over time, or
what are the constraints on it? How does it operate? But in something like Harry Potter, there's more of, you get a sense of what things can and can't do, what conditions there needs to be.
There are rules about these things, and you can be instructed in it. And
yeah. So the ultimate hard magic is reality, which is, can you make a bridge across there? Well, we can, but only if you have these cables, because it has to be about force lifting up.
Right.
There's spiritual laws as well, and there are laws about how the two interact. Everything Jesus did, even though there was some things that you couldn't, it'd be very hard to recreate, they all followed those laws. So here, this transfiguration, I think you're right, that there wasn't physical light. If you had one of those in your hand, one of those light sensors, it wouldn't have gone off, because what was happening for the disciples is the same thing that happened for Swedenborg, which is that, and same thing that happened for everyone who ever sees their grandma after she's died at the foot of their bed. She's not physically there. You can't go look at the carpet where her feet were in it. Your spiritual eyes are opened, and you see into the spiritual world, because everybody has a spirit and a body.
Yeah.
So you are waking up to that part of you. So they were seeing things in the spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, Swedenborg talks about all the time. Jesus is the light. God is the thing that illuminates that whole world.
And there's a lot more glowing and gleaming. And Swedenborg, we may be talking about this shortly, that angels' clothes, radiate light and in that world in a way that they don't in this world.
So yeah, let me read a little, let me see if that's true. Secrets of Heaven 5248. Spirits appear in clothing that does not shine. So spirits would be like people who have just recently come from the world into the afterlife.
The newbies.
But angels appear in clothing that shines, that is almost made of light, because the glow surrounding them appears like a garment.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the glow, it's not that your garments are shining, it's that the glow is garment-like. You're just clothed in this glow. And near-death experiences since forever have talked about those kind of things, haven't they? They've tried to say.
Beings of light.
Yeah, beings of light. Everything's made of light. Everything. You're made of light. Everything else is made of light.
And so the hard magic explanation for that is that in the spiritual world, truth is light. So the more truth that you have, this is why spirits wouldn't have their clothes shining. The clothes are correspondence to the things that you know in a certain sense.
Yes.
That when those are really true, they are transparent in the sense that they let God through, because God is the truth. So God's coming out, and what it seems to be saying there is the truth that's in your heart and mind, it clothes you. That you not even really have clothes. You have the glow of that truth.
Yes.
That performs the same function for you.
Yes. And so they were seeing the face has to do with divine love, and the clothing is this truth. And they're seeing Jesus as he is inwardly, that there's this blasting love and this amazing truth that's radiating out, that's alive and potent in a way that, in a sense, almost nothing in this physical world really compares to that divine power and life that's there.
He finishes the quote, "Their clothes resemble those the Lord wore when he was transfigured, which were like the light and dazzling white." He goes on to Secrets of Heaven. "The actual holiness of the Lord's divine humanity was also a garment, one that appeared like light and was dazzling white when he was transfigured." This is what Matthew says about it. When Jesus was transfigured, his face shone like the sun, his clothes became like the light. In Luke, when Jesus prayed, the appearance of his face became different, his garment dazzling white. So he's saying that what they're seeing there on the clothes side is the actual holiness of the Lord's divine humanity.
And comparing, if I'm getting it, that the human nature that he originally got from his mother Mary was a clothing itself. It was clothes that this divine spirit was wearing.
We are spirits clothed with the body.
Yeah,
you hear that? Yeah,
right. Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that angle about the clothes and the transfiguration shining like that. That's cool.
Just saying. Hey, if you found yourself watching this show a lot and you look forward to it, you feel like it does something good for you, consider becoming a member of the channel. There's a little join button. If you click that, it's just a teeny tiny little monthly fee. It makes a huge difference to us because it gives us the stability of income to be able to do this. We're a not-for-profit. We depend on you. If this is making your life better, consider becoming a member, and then that helps us continue to make this show so it can go reach the next person. Thanks for considering. Okay, in the next part of the story, the disciples sort of embarrassed themselves because I'll read it to you.
It's such a weird
Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And in what comes next is the voice in the cloud. It's like, Jesus is my son. But you could see where they were coming from. Jesus appears, is talking to Moses and Elijah are dead. He's talking to the spirits of Moses and Elijah. You can see why Peter would think, oh, you guys are all of the same category of thing.
Yeah.
So why bring Moses and Elijah out? It doesn't even say what they said. Doesn't say how they reacted. Did they wave to the disciples? Could they see them? It just says he's talking to them.
Yeah.
Why do that?
Yes, and it never struck me before, but I try to put myself in their shoes. To them, Moses and Elijah, when I look back, I think, oh, Jesus was there?
Yeah.
But to them, it's like Moses and Elijah have way more cachet than Jesus. I mean, yeah, they're following him around and he's remarkable, but they don't know what's going on. And
Yeah.
I don't know. The prophet's not without honor except in his own they don't fully get what's going on.
Right.
But Moses and Elijah,
those are the heavy
I
hitters.
hadn't thought about it, but that's huge for them because they, wrote Hebrew scriptures and long, centuries and centuries in the past.
So, again, you get to this conundrum where it's like, Moses and Elijah are human beings. Like you, like me.
That's right.
But are they in a tier of humans where Jesus would appear alongside them? When do I appear there? When does anyone else?
Yeah. And why not Elisha or why not Aaron or
Right.
Joshua or these other
Right.
great characters?
Is it that there's a couple of people that are like the major celebrities of the human race, or is there a symbolism just like there is with the disciples that applies to everyone everywhere all the time?
In another gospel, in Luke also has a story of the transfiguration, and there you find out a tiny bit about what their conversation was, that they just were talking to Jesus about his death that was coming up soon.
Oh, it says that?
Yeah.
Nice.
But that's you don't hear a word of who is saying what, or they're having a conversation about this death, which again to the disciples, like, what?
They don't know he's going to die. But
This is some future event.
Think you would capture those words. So this is a place where correspondence, you can't deny. You can't deny this correspondence. It's so self-evident. It just makes
this is one that really clicks to
obvious
me.
sense. See if it does for you at home, like it does for me. The Lord, this is going to Swedenborg, Secrets of Heaven 5922. The Lord was showing Peter, James, and John his divine humanity as it really was, and as it appeared in divine light. The form in which he was then seen presented an image of the Word, as it is in its inner meaning, and consequently of the divine truth that exists in heaven. For this reason, the vision included Moses and Elijah speaking with the Lord, since Moses represents the law, meaning the books he wrote along with the narrative books, and Elijah represents the prophets, that is, the prophetical part of the word.
Now does anybody else say the transfiguration?
Take my money. Take my money, Swedenborg. Just take it.
Just take it. You deserve it.
Of course. You have there's Jesus, and then you have the two major components of the scriptures at the time, which is the books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and then the prophetic parts, which is like the Isaiah, the Psalms.
Yeah. And so there's this saying, the law and the prophets, right? It's the law, and Moses is the law, Elijah's the prophets. And you only need two of them. There were lots of different prophets, but those two figures do that whole thing in one go. And who thinks that the transfiguration is Jesus as an embodiment? I mean, yes, we all know that in John chapter 1 it says, he was the Word.
That.
Are we quoting that?
Just a second. Yep.
It's union rules. You have to quote it.
Well, you have to quote it, but you don't have to understand it. In the beginning was the Word, and when the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. What are you talking about? Here it's explaining what he's talking about. Oh, this is another from Swedenborg, Apocalypse Revealed, 897. We are told that after the Lord was transfigured, Moses and Elijah appeared in glory. Moses and Elijah there symbolized the Word. This is reasserting that. The Lord himself also then caused himself to appear to the disciples as the Word in its glory. And then True Christianity, number 261. And this is where it quotes what we were just quoting. I wrote a note beside this that says, Jonathan, what does this mean?
Okay, good. I'll be ready.
I'm hey man, I get a little bit interview time here. You're gonna help suss
All
this
right.
out for me. While in the world, the Lord fulfilled everything in the Word. By doing so, he became the Word or divine truth, even on the last or outermost level. The Lord was, of course, the Word or divine truth before he came, but only on the first or inmost level. We read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." When the Word became flesh, however, the Lord became the Word even on the last or outermost level. This is why the Lord is called the first and the last. And he gives references in Revelation and Isaiah for that. So what are we talking about? Okay, so the Lord is the Word. I don't even know what the Word is. What's the Word? It's divine truth?
Yeah, I mean, on the face of it, the Word is the Bible, the Old and the New Testament. But he says inwardly, what's in there is this divine truth.
Okay.
And you're a God who hides yourself. You know, the divinity is hidden in the text. Everybody knows it's holy. It's called the Holy Bible. Says that right on the spine. But what is holy in there?
Whenever I put my pad down, people know they can skip ahead 10 minutes.
Good.
Because we're about to go on.
Because we're about to get into it here.
Really good. Do a barn raising right here.
Yeah, that's right. So I think of truth in this situation. Be hard to defend my point of view, but the truth as the form, like you have substance and you have form.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so here's the substance of gold. Oh, and it's shaped like a mouse here or something.
That's
There's
right.
a biblical
My gold
story
mouse.
about this. So
my
the
lucky gold mouse.
Golden mouse. So that's substance, and then it's in this form. The divine love is the substance of God, and then it takes this form of divine truth. So divine truth is kind of the folder, the envelope. It's the vessel that reflects what that divine love is. That always had to exist. And because everything that happens in the universe happens by love, knows what needs. Love chooses that this should happen. Mm. Truth is the part that knows how to do it, or the divine wisdom, you know? So love says, well, I have this purpose of creating a human race. And then wisdom says, well, here's how you do that would reflect divine love. So that embodiment has always happened since the beginning of time. It has to be there. And that's why John would say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It is God, but it's also with in the sense that it's the form of this divine love. Am I making any sense whatsoever?
This is exactly great. And the first thing that you said, I feel like really opens it up. Okay, I ordered something on Amazon. And what did I order? Well, I ordered some socks. And then I hear the dogs barking at the door. And I look out, and sure enough, my socks are here. This is going to break down. But what I actually see,
I like where you're going.
is not socks. I do not see the socks. I see a little brown paper baggy thing. But the socks are in there.
Yes.
That is the carrier for the socks. To me, it's like that's where the socks are. So you said the divine truth, well, the Word is the Bible. The Word is the Bible. However, like sort of, the Bible is the part that we see of the divine truth. It's the packaging. Because I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think since time immemorial, there's been the book of Genesis, the book of Acts. Like there's not a copy of the bound Bible sitting up in heaven. There's the truth that's inside of it. There's the spiritual, the meaning that we're trying to uncover here. That is it. That's like the face of God. And then it has taken a number of forms in the world. Swedenborg talks about the ancient word that came before this word.
It was quite different.
Nature?
Yeah.
He said nature.
Different stories, different,
At one point,
quite different. But the same truth, the same truth embodied.
At one point, people could read that same truth from what I understand, in nature. That Swedenborg would talk about ancient ancient peoples that would worship on mountains because they didn't need to hear about the mountain in the Bible. They saw the mountain and understood that's what it meant. However, as the human race changed, it became necessary to package that eternal truth in different forms. The current one is what we call the Bible. So that's good. I get that.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting analogy you make, because when you're ordering the socks online,
The divine socks.
you have socks in mind. You're thinking about socks.
I sure do.
And then you go through images online of socks until you find the ones that you think, oh, those seem, that seems right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You haven't seen the physical socks. It happens to us sometimes that we order something and it comes and it's tiny or it's way too big.
I think they call that nailed it. Like where you order something and then the real thing arrives and it's 1/4 the size you think it is, and you're supposed to post it. This is what you're supposed to do probably 6 years ago.
Yeah,
you post it and you say nailed
I'm
it.
showing my... Yeah,
No.
right.
This is me. I've just barely figured out what a meme is. So give me
that's good.
Give me
That's
a little
good.
space here.
That's good. That's good. And then, so in a way, those images of the socks would be a kind of divine truth that always existed. Like that was already there, you know, in the divine, if you see what I mean.
Yep.
But then when Jesus is born, it's like the socks are on your doorstep.
Oh, yeah.
They actually physically exist. It's not just a picture online. Or it's not an image of it. It's an actual woven item that's out there in a box on your doorstep, you know?
You can put on your feet and they can keep your feet warm.
And so that divine truth has come down onto a different level now to do something that couldn't be done by the picture online. And yet without the picture online, you wouldn't be ordering. You wouldn't be ordering.
I've been reading a book called Swedenborgian Systematic Theology by Reverend Prescott Rogers.
Okay.
And it's this great sort of summary of summary of Swedenborg is a crude way to put it. But he was saying that the word is all the means of salvation. That's what the word, everything in the word, all these truths and everything, the only function of them is the salvation of human beings, which the salvation of human beings is the bringing of them into heaven. So your sock analogy, my sock analogy, that now I feel like you own it now, is that the socks, sure, they exist in God's factory somewhere, in his warehouse, but that's not why God doesn't need to have those socks. The only reason he makes anything outside of himself is for the salvation of the human race. So those socks always wanted to do was be warm on your feet.
Yes, that's right.
Because all the salvation in the word.
They don't exist to sit in a factory and be inventoried every year. So that was not why.
So Jesus Christ is the socks going on your feet. He's embodying all the word out on our level so that it can reach us and touch us through the word, through all these miraculous means, and it can do the thing that the word wants to do, which is bring you into heaven.
And it's amazing to think about Jesus talking to Moses and Elijah, because it's a little picture because we know that Jesus was reading the scriptures when he was 12 years old. He appears in the temple and he's asking the great and the wise and the learned all these questions, and they're astounded at his answers. Like he says, well, I think this is what, he's already working on the word project at that point. Like he's working on his understanding. He's talking to Moses and Elijah when he's, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
His human embodiment is talking to those texts and talking specifically about this amazing glorification that's going to happen, his death and resurrection. So there's something divine talking to these to the Old Testament.
He does it the way that we do it. You could say, God, why did you put me in this world where I don't really know if you're really there? I don't even know. Are you really there? And the means by which I can access you is there's most often through sacred texts of some kind. They are cryptic. I don't really know which one to choose. And let's say I am convinced that the Bible is the word. Okay, great. Go in there and I just have to read this book and I guess sometimes I see you, and you could say, what is that really the treatment that I deserve being a child of God? I don't know, but what I can say is that's the way God himself did it.
Yeah.
It was good enough for him. He didn't skip it. He didn't skip it and come down and already be transfigured and hold forth and Zoe is in divine. He did the same slog that we do.
Yes.
So there's like probably some reason why it is that way.
Right.
He did it himself. He waited in line at his own club.
Yes, he did.
People are going to think I've ever been in a club, which I have not. But I know there's a thing.
I hear that the young people do these things. Yes.
I am already want to go to bed, and it's not even noon yet. I'm just saying. Okay, thank you. I can cross off my note of Jonathan explain what this means to me. This is going to Secrets of Heaven 6752. There are two people primarily who represent the Lord with respect to the Word, namely Moses and Elijah. So even if you go look at the stories where Moses appears, the stories where Elijah appears, they are representing the Lord as the Word there. In addition to those two, there is Elisha, and lastly, John the Baptist, who is therefore the one who is meant by the Elijah who is to come in Matthew 17, Luke 1.
That's right. There's some prophecy that Elijah's going to come back again, and then the New Testament associates John the Baptist with the Elijah who was to come.
I don't think it's trying to say there's reincarnation, that he's reincarnated.
No, that's the way a lot of people took it. Even in the stories in the New Testament, he's come back to life.
But if you understand that all these characters are in the Word not because of the exact person that they were.
Yeah.
Some of these people that represented these great things were terrible people.
Yeah.
But the representation they had, that is what is reborn. So John the Baptist is playing the same role in the story that Elisha played.
Yeah, right.
Since Moses represented the Lord with respect to the historical section of the Word, and Elijah represented the Lord with respect to the prophetical part, Moses and Elijah were therefore seen talking to the Lord at his transfiguration. No others except those who represented the Word could have talked to the Lord when he manifested his divinity in the world. For talking to the Lord is done through the Word. I underlined that part.
Yes. That was a good underline. Yeah, so it makes me wonder whether no Moseses and Elijahs were harmed in the making of this film. I don't know whether they were even there or whether that was just kind of a vision. That's why it says they appeared in their glory. This is Jesus' transfiguration.
Yeah.
And yet Moses and Elijah are, in their glory, whatever that means. And but that's because they're embodying something divine, that divine substance that's in these different parts of the Scripture.
For talking to the Lord is done through the Word. That
is the means of communication.
That's true for everybody. Yeah. That's how you do it. That's how you approach the Lord, is through the Word. That's how Jesus was doing it. And I was approaching his divine self,
Yeah, and I never really thought about this before because I always thought, okay, well, we're not privy to that conversation. I don't know what he said. I don't know what they said. They're talking about his death in the one account in Luke, but it's a powerful thought that we too talk to the Scriptures, or we can talk to the Scriptures about our own death, about and I'm not talking about our physical death, about the kind of rebirth and the transformation that needs to happen. They can tell you. See, in the story, Moses and Elijah have extraordinary powers, right? They already know how his death is going to go. The disciples have Peter tries to talk him out. Like, don't even say that. That'll never happen, But they know how the story's going to end. Well, I don't think the earthly Moses and Elijah knew that. But as that divine wisdom that's in the Word that knew from all time, since creation, how this whole thing was going to go down, they're in there. And so they can also tell us about okay, your particular story, let's have a discussion with Moses and Elijah about how things are going to go. How are we going to die to our outer selves and arise as our inner selves? The angelic version of ourselves. They know that. Nobody else knows that. It's the divine in there, meant by the Moses and Elijah. That's who knows how our story goes, and it's encoded in the book. It's already in the book.
Well, people, why are you into the Swedenborg? That's the only way that I can understand how to talk to the Lord through the Word. Because I would read this story, I wouldn't get what it was talking about. I don't know how to apply that to my life.
Right over
I don't
my
know
head.
how to have that solve my problems for me.
I never thought of it until this moment. That idea that we would be talking to those.
But
we would have a conversation with Moses and Elijah.
Whatever you think about it, Swedenborg's system of explanation that he says he found out about from Jesus himself.
Yeah.
That
while
to me,
he was reading the Bible. Right.
Now I can hear the Lord's voice a little bit. Now I can hear the Lord's voice a little bit. Let's talk about the cloud and the voice that comes out of the cloud.
Okay, here we go.
This one, a lot of people pay attention to this. I think this is a fulcrumatic point in Trinitarian interpretations of the Bible, isn't it?
It's one of your top 10, I think. Yeah, it's a big one.
Matthew 17:5. While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud, a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." And this is, again, in sort of a rebuke to the disciples saying, let's make 3 dwellings, one for those 2 prophets and one for you. This seems to be saying, no, Jesus is the important one.
Yes.
Now.
Yeah, it doesn't specifically say Moses and Elijah or where they fit in, but it's just like, this one.
Ignore those other 2.
Yeah.
Listen to this guy. Now, so a lot of people would say that's the Father, because it's calling him my Son. So that's the Father talking from that cloud.
God, who else could it be? Yeah.
However, like we've been asserting here, and I would hope offering some evidence to support that assertion, the Bible speaks in the language of correspondences of recurring symbols.
Yes.
So we said a mountain, same thing in Genesis, mountain, same thing in the Gospel of Matthew. So it is with clouds. Look at this. If you're saying this is just the Father saying this, the fact that why is the Father behind a cloud? Who knows? He's just behind a cloud. Why does it say the voice comes out of the cloud? I don't know. He didn't want to show himself.
I've never been spoken to directly by any cloud or even mist or fog.
Why leave it ambiguous? Why not just, I'm here, I'm the Father, I'm saying this, but it's a voice out of a cloud. Let's see, what does Swedenborg say?
And it's a bright cloud.
Yeah, a bright cloud.
So it's not scary. It's not a storm cloud or something. It's a bright cloud. But it still seems to terrify the disciples, right? I mean, they're very, very afraid of the cloud.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. It's a lot. This is Apocalypse Revealed 24. A cloud means the word in its literal sense.
What?
Which, because it encloses and covers the spiritual meaning, is called a covering over the glory. Divine truth in its outmost expressions, which is the same as the word in its literal sense, was also represented by the cloud which Jehovah descended upon Mount Sinai and proclaimed the law, in which Jehovah did that.
There was a cloud in that? So wait a minute. You had a mountain and a cloud.
Yeah.
And on Mount Sinai. And here you got a mountain and a cloud.
In this,
and there were voices in the 10 Commandments too, aren't there?
That's right.
The voice comes out.
In this transfiguration, the Lord caused himself to be seen as the Word. What's going on here? The Lord is showing himself as the Word, which is why a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice was heard from the cloud saying that this was the Son of God. The voice from the cloud means from the Word.
So,
seen.
Yeah, this it took me a while to see that this is what a cloud means in the Bible, but I really see it now. And like an image that comes to mind is in the Old Testament in Exodus, in the story of the children of Israel. What is it that leads them through the wilderness? It's a pillar of fire by night and of cloud by day. That's what, and it does a most uncloud-like things, to stay right over these people and then to lead them and guide them. And clouds don't usually talk.
Right.
And it's related also to the smoke that when the tabernacle's first created, it fills with smoke, and Moses himself has to get out of there because they can't take it because the glory of God fills it.
Yeah.
It has something to do with the smoke. In the book of Revelation, there's also an image of smoke coming down and filling the temple, and this happens when they dedicate Solomon's temple, I think, and again the ministers can't minister, and
Jesus says, "When I come again, I'm going to be riding on the clouds.
I'm going to be coming in the clouds of heaven, yes, with power and great glory."
Great glory.
Yeah, and people have just, how is that going to work? Because scientifically, you can't. It's never cloudy all over the whole planet at the same time. It says every eye will see him when this happens. Not everybody's awake at the same time. What are you talking about? And I even think it's related to Paul's statement about the rapture, that we'll be caught up into the air where Jesus is. I think that air is similar to this cloud. That Scripture is it is cloudy. And Swedenborg also alluded in there to, I think it's Isaiah 4, verse 4, that says that over all the glory there should be a covering. This idea of glory and covering. So often you get glory and cloud, glory and smoke, and that has to do with the divine truth as it is at a level where, as you have quoted before, you can't handle the truth, and you need a cloud to kind of calm it down, sort of the way that we're 93 million miles away from the sun and we have this atmosphere. I was just reading about how the astronauts who go up there, it can really sort of tear your cells apart. Yeah, I mean, there's just particles that are flying through. It's intense.
Are you going to put on sunscreen today? It's cloudy. I don't need to put on sunscreen.
Yeah, I'm sheltered. And so the cloud, it's a bright cloud because it has the light of truth in it, but the cloud really speaks to what we're doing right now in this show is we're looking at this cloud, which is that when you first encounter it, you just think, what is going on? It's confusing. And where is the divinity? This story is so weird.
Isn't it?
It's foggy.
Isn't it well and widely known that if you're looking at clouds, what shape is that cloud? It's very hard for two people to see the same shape in the cloud. Because to you, that's obviously a crocodile. And somebody says, I don't see it. I see the kangaroo.
I don't see it. Yeah.
And you have to describe it. They can get it, but you have to describe it very hard, subject to interpretation. Isn't that what happens with Scripture? Don't you have absolute cornucopia, the whole spectrum of people just on the internet saying, this is what Scripture means. No, this is what it means. We, of course, being one of these, this is what it means. No, this is what it means. How can you say it means that? It doesn't mean that, it means this. People are looking at this thing, and because it is cloudy, it is opaque, then...
And everybody has a different interpretation of what that shape is. What is that shape?
Like the Communist Manifesto. Or it's not like the Wealth of Nations, or it's not like one of these things that I am telling you a philosophy of life. Here is my worldview.
Here's this clear, concrete statement.
It's not like that. Yeah. People don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It is mystifying.
I'm listening to this wonderful audio book right now about plants. It's called The Nature of Plants. It's really great. And it's so clear. This is why it has this in order to do that. Then the plant does this, and it has that. It's so clear. It's possible to be clear in the English language.
Yeah.
And the Bible is not clear. It's confusing.
If you submitted...
Why did Jesus say that? Why did this happen? Why didn't it say the ending of that story?
If you try to get a TED Talk, You have to submit your idea to TED.
Yes.
And they will say like this, and all the coaching and everything on it. It's like you have to have a clear idea that you're
Clear
communicating.
is the main thing. And succinct, right?
If God said, I'm going to do a TED Talk, and TED is like, this is great. We may have had our peak of relevance maybe a little while back, but having God give a TED Talk, this is going to be, what's this going to do for our brand? This is incredible. Okay, God, we're so excited for your TED Talk. I mean, obviously it's going to be what's your talk about? Well, I'm talking about the salvation of the human race, how to bring everyone into heaven. Oh, that's perfect. It's what everyone wants. It's so great. Okay, can you just give us a quick outline of your talk? Sure. I'm going to talk about the world and how it was created. Then I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to tell this story of a garden, and there's Adam and Eve. Then I'm going to follow
the tribe,
the story of this one particular group of people for a long time as they go in and out. Then I'm going to break into,
and they kind of fall apart, and
and then I'm going to break into sort of poetry for a long time, and then I'm going to Then I'm going to focus on the story of this life that I live on Earth, and I'm going to tell it 4 different times in a row.
That are not quite consistent with each other.
Not quite the same. Then I'm going to have some, then I'm going to end it all with this vision of it's really cryptic revelation.
It's going to end in a really baffling.
There's a dragon and there's a lady.
Baffling note.
And then that's it. And I'm not going to take any questions or anything. They're going to be like, oh gosh, I don't want to tell them, but you tell them. This is not clear.
This is not going to make it.
This is not what you're saying is not clear. It's cloudy. If you're not willing.
People are not going to understand. I'm telling you,
But
people
by
are
the
not
way,
going to understand your talk.
In the middle of it, I'm going to spend quite a while telling you the dimensions of different buildings.
Yes.
I'm going to
It's
really go
a
at
major focus.
I'm going to really tell you materials,
windows, decoration, foundations, stories.
And you and I are,
many times. Actually, I'll repeat that many times. Yeah.
And we love the Bible. Yeah, I love it. It's great.
Oh yeah.
And
it's amazing.
If you actually love it, you got to admit it's cloudy. There's some parts that feel really like they speak to you, and there's a lot of parts that people can draw great moral teachings from. The Sermon on the Mount, the 10 Commandments. It's cloud. The whole thing is cloudy.
And I gotta say that's at best about 1% of the text, isn't it? Because for everything, like for years I would take the Bible, I'd close my eyes, turn it upside down, roll it around, and just open it to poke my finger in and see sort of what scripture do I find and what does it say? Well, it was usually yelling at the Philistines, or it was, it's a confusing book. There's a lot of places that you could find by just doing that randomization that are not going to be a very good quote for the day.
And yet, why would if we were to say the Bible is cloudy? There's so many people that would want to yell at us online about that. And in real life, if we said it there. There's so many people
because of that view that it's clear. It says what it means, and it means what it says.
But why would they ever come to that view of it means what it says? And because despite its cloudy nature, it's doing something for people. This is the tent pole of their life. This is where they get their inspiration and their comfort, and they're gathering around it. It is working on. There's a reason why. Again, it's far and away the best-selling book in the world. It's still 2,000 years after Jesus. There's so much built around it.
It's dominant in publishing. Yeah,
it's working for people, and so they say, well, you got to defend. So it's doing something, even though it's cloudy. You are meeting the Lord in there somehow. People do it by a number of different routes, but you end up meeting the Lord in there.
Yeah. And people don't like to turn their back on it. I mean, a lot of people, I think, find things in there as they get older and they look at it and think about it for themselves. I hate that story. I mean, that's a horrible story. They find something in there that turns them off, or that seems like not right, or they hear something about it that bothers them. But they hate to just bin it, because it's the Bible.
Well, because it makes people feel a certain way. It fulfills a certain role in their life. How many people...
When you hit it right, boom, when the light shines through there, there's nothing like it.
Well, how many people, there's a lot of Psalms that are just weird, like you crushed my enemies, you beat them as fine as the dust, and this.
Yes,
how is this loving God, and how is this any better than any Al Capone kind of? Yeah, you crushed my enemies.
And the people say the Psalms are like the best.
However,
I love the Psalm.
How much of the biblical experience worldwide is the 23rd Psalm, and people hanging on to that, as I have, like a little life raft.
A life raft,
and it works.
And it works.
You repeat it. You repeat it to yourself,
it does.
And it works.
And it works. 6 verses long.
So
nothing to it.
I'm just saying, it's cloudy, but it works.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one where I straight up in the notes. The other one I was like, this one I actually wrote your name. Like, okay, Jonathan, explain this to me.
Okay.
This is from going to sacred scripture. The bright cloud that overshadowed the disciples meant the word in its literal meaning. So it was from this that they heard the voice say, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." This is because all proclamations and answers from heaven, without exception, come about by means of outermost forms, the kind we find in the literal meaning of the word. They come about in fullness by means of the Lord.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Good. I've got lots of wisdom on that. Yeah.
What are we talking about here? So
what it makes me think is that I've had the desire often to say, I wish God could just sit down with me and say, okay, now here's what's going on. You're feeling bad about this. This is going on. That's going on. Here's where this is headed. And this is the psychology. This is what's going on in your heart and your mind and all that. You sit down with the Bible, and the Bible says, well, there's grapes, and there was a snake, and there was a tree, and there was a...
Yeah.
And
Jericho.
Yeah. And what I take that to be saying there is that this is the way, like when God himself was born into the world, he did it again, right? Like the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures were that way, full of this imagery and stories of shepherds and battles and weapons and mountains and all kinds of things. Jesus comes in the flesh, and he says the same thing. He's also talking about grapes and vineyards and very concrete things, because that's how the divine communicates. And that's partly what Swedenborg says is it's because there's this kind of a hierarchy. And I know we're not a time period that loves hierarchies, but there's something, the divine's all the way at the top, and then you get heavens, and it comes all the way down, and it comes all the way down to like concrete physical matter, the most external things. And if God doesn't come all the way down, it's not complete. Mm-hmm. It needs to come all the way down to almost a chemical physics kind of level at the very bottom. And so that's why it's expressed that way. And if you hear God talking to you, and he's using a lot of vocabulary of like that isn't concrete, you know,
you don't know what it's saying.
That's not the divine speaking to you, because
right,
like your dreams communicate. There's
true.
A bicycle and there's a path, and there, you know, last night I was riding a bike in my dream, and there was this, and it was frozen out. We were going under this bridge, and it was almost like a luge track or something. We're trying to ride, and I thought, isn't this going to freeze on the wheels or something? But we were flying along, and it's concrete. It's a bike.
That's right.
Right. It's not sort of abstractions of somebody saying, well, Jonathan, you know.
Let me tell you. That's right. That's how your dreams are, and that's also how life is. Life is not, you don't get a lecture series for life. You just get, here's your house, here's these people you know, here's events that happen to you. Here's, by the way, here's the sun going up and down every day. Here's trees.
Yeah.
Okay, well, one last thing about this. True Christianity 92. The Son of God. Why does he say the Son of God? Why does the voice in the cloud
Yes,
say the
because
Son?
it plays right into a Trinitarian view of three separate persons of the Godhead, which Swedenborg says there aren't.
By the way, Swedenborg doesn't deny a Trinity.
No.
Which is, well, he'll say
Not at all. Trinity, terribly important.
what he says is people looking at the cloud of Scripture and getting it wrong is the idea that there are three separate persons in the Trinity that have their own separate wills and their own separate minds, so
Their
much
own
so
agendas
that
and-
one can placate the other through sacrificing himself.
Right.
That it's not, you don't have, you have three-headed parent,
Right.
The Son of God is a human manifestation in which God sent himself into the world. The Lord frequently says that the Father sent him, or that he was sent by the Father. The Lord says this because being sent into the world means coming down among people, which he did through the human manifestation he took on through the Virgin Mary.
Yes. So he sent himself. It's not somebody different.
It's not an emissary.
Why it's referred to as the Father and the Son, there's a couple of reasons, but one reason is, as I know you've read, that the Father means love, the Son means truth. So this is my Son is saying this is the truth. The Word is saying this is the truth. This is the embodiment of truth that we're talking about.
All
here.
we're saying is, without a parable spake he not.
That's right.
We've been going through the Bible here. You may say that Swedenborg's theory is off the wall, but you can't from now on say it's not consistent, because we're going through here
Yes.
and we're saying that a mountain is a figurative, just like in your dreams, a mountain is a figurative expression that means something deeper, wherever it is occurs in the Bible.
Yeah.
Why would it be that all this father-son talk is suddenly exactly literal? This again, these are symbols
Yeah.
as well. If
It's
James
symbols as well.
and John
if
and
James
Peter,
John and Peter, that's right.
Moses is a symbol, Elijah is
Elijah.
a symbol, Jesus is the symbol.
Yes.
Everything symbolizes God. His is him, God directly.
Right.
When he's talking about being the Son of God, that's a symbol as well.
Yes.
That's all we're just saying. You don't have to see it our way, but the way we're saying it's self-consistent.
Yes. And another reason for having the Son language is that it really is true that there was this divine itself, as he says, that existed from eternity. And then in time, there was this human being who was born in the world with that same whole divinity in there.
Yes.
But it was a different entity because of that hybridness, that it was part this divinity and part just a human being who was descended from a specific mother in this world, having its own independent existence on the planet.
Temporarily.
Yes,
Like the
temporarily.
project throughout life was to take that human part and, I don't know, hollow it out so that it was fully, you have God fully present
Right.
in this form. I'm not saying it's not confusing and there's not more,
Right.
we can try to go in there and figure it out. I'm not saying that it's like,
But-
it's just so,
but-
there's nothing to it. But
There
however,
are reasons why it's called the Father, why it's called the Son.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not saying that
And
God
it doesn't mean what you think it means.
this formless monolith. Yeah, sure. We're making a claim that there is something that happened with Jesus that wasn't happening before. However, it's all one God. And there's not even different persons in there. This is just that same God embarking on a new venture.
And that's why Jesus was so bold as to repeatedly say, I am, which is
Yeah.
the name of God from all the way back. Is it Exodus 3, where the one appears at the bush and says,
Right.
I am. It's the same one. There's no other God.
So it's just probably it's a little bit confusing, this episode. But let me see if we can summarize it in a way that makes like what was going on here graspable. This is from True Christianity 222. So this will be Swedenborg summarizing it, not me. When the Lord was transfigured, he represented the Word in its glory. I have been taught that in this instance, the Lord represented the Word. His face shining like the sun represented the divine goodness of his divine love. The clothes that became like light represented the divine truth of his divine wisdom. Moses and Elijah represented the historical word and the prophetic word. Moses represented the word that was written through him and the historical word in general. Elijah represented the whole prophetic word. The shining cloud that covered the disciples represented the word in its literal meaning. That is why a voice was heard coming from the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." All communications and answers from heaven come solely through outermost things like those in the word's literal meaning. The Lord communicates in a complete way.
And it's an ironic ending in a way, because you wouldn't think that was complete because it was so initially baffling. And yet when you hear that inner meaning laid out like that, and we've gone into most of those elements, it's so coherent. It's all got to do with that scripture. One point that I didn't make before that I want to add is that, isn't it interesting that he's saying the reason the voice comes from the cloud is because the literal meaning of scripture will tell you that Jesus is God. It will you don't need the fancy you don't need to go into that. You don't need to see Jesus transfigured to know that he is God. That's what it means that the voice came out of the cloud and says, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." And it's a lot like the road to Emmaus that we've talked about before, where Jesus in Luke tells the disciples that everything in the Old Testament was all about him, and he explains it to them. Here's how that whole thing was telling his story. And just to connect these dots, his story is our story. It might seem like, oh, that's a completely different story than our story. But the transformation that he went through it very quickly and did it very well. But that is the same story of how each of us becomes our own unique angel. And Swedenborg says that's what we're headed for. It's a story of transformation. Jesus became, God himself, like fully cooked the whole thing. We don't get that far, but we become an angel. And that's the book that tells you that story and helps you do it. That's why it's showing you that the Bible is magnificent, which is not where that's not what I thought that story was about. When you go up on the mountain, it's not even really, it is all about Jesus, but it's really about the Word. What a powerful thing that divine presence in the Bible is.
Complete way. So it could have been that Jesus just said to the disciples some better summary of what we've said here.
Yeah.
Let's say that this really is the meaning. He could have just said that in a couple of paragraphs, summarized it maybe pretty well. However, instead, what he did was, we're going to have this series of events that are described. And I think that's because there's infinite information packed into there.
Yes.
That here we are again, 2,000 years later, and we are able to continually pull new truth out of this. And according to Swedenborg, there's meaning in that story in heaven as well. There's an inner meaning. There's an even higher celestial meaning in there. And those meanings, what to us, in our version of looking at the word, in the outermost part of the word here, we can gather a few truths. Maybe we can gather 100 different insights into life from this story. Spiritual angels would see, 10,000 things in there that they can pull out and understand. And the higher angels still, what Swedenborg would call the celestial angels, there's millions of truths in there. Just like if you have your hand and there's their one thing, one thumb. Okay, but within there's like so many ligaments and tendons and bones and muscles, and then within that there are just millions of cells. So it is with the things. God delivers it in this complete form that will still be relevant, should still be relevant to the human race in another 2,000 years, another 10,000 years, because it was delivered in this complete way through this infinitely capable language of correspondences.
And in the spirit of full disclosure, the story said, "I'm cloudy on the outside." It said it right in the story. It said, "I'm cloudy on the outside, but I have all this light and love inside."
Thanks for playing the clouds here with me a bit. Thank you, everybody, for being willing to go through the weeds. Let's mix metaphors, all these details, but hopefully you come away with a new sense of the transfiguration and its relevance and importance, and hopefully it makes your life better. That's what we're trying to do. Thanks, Jonathan, for another great episode.
Thank you, Curtis.